Hello everyone, this is part 11 of What If Naruto Was Born in the Uzumaki clan, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Because of me. Those three words hung in the air for several long moments. For Naruto it was the closest thing akin to a confession, and he was watching the expression of both his friends quite attentively. They had known about his guilt for not being able to save Uzu, but had always assumed it was just because of his feelings as a loyal ninja. Apparently, it was more than that. What do you mean? Asked Nagato carefully. Knowing Naruto and his usual defensive manner of dealing with emotional situations, it was best if they spoke less and let their friend explain in whatever way he felt comfortable. Akino didn't say a word, but the look in her eyes was enough to convey that she would never hold him responsible for Uzu's demise no matter what. That confidence and reassurance from both of his friends was the only reason Naruto decided to continue. This was not a well-known secret, but our village was planning to have its own Jinchuriki after seeing many smaller villages like ours getting destroyed in the previous war. Since Uzu lacks the resources and manpower to defend itself from the Great Five, and espionage will only get you so far, the elders of our clan decided to have this weapon be developed for Uzu's safety. He watched the sheer shock in both of his friends' eyes, followed by, "But all the tailed beasts are currently divided among the Great Five." And Akino stopped mid-sentence as she realized the answer to her own question. If Uzu wanted a Jinchuriki, then it needed to have a tailed beast first, and the only way they were going to get it was if they stole one or more of those monsters from the other big villages that actually had them. And if by any chance any of those villages came to know this. She clenched her eyes shut and silently cursed their elders for making such a disastrous decision. Of course, Iwa, Kiri and Kumo had mercilessly decimated Uzu for daring to even think of taking their tailed beasts away from them. She looked at Nagato, who had also arrived at the same conclusion and seemed terribly saddened. "Naruto, how do you know this?" asked Akino hesitantly. "Because I was the one chosen to become the Jinchuriki of our village if we managed to get a tailed beast for ourselves. They said my Bi powers were stronger than anyone else in our clan, and that could be easily used to keep the tailed beast trapped within me." "I agreed," confessed Naruto. "Why would you do such a thing?" shouted both his friends in unison, the menacing fury and horror easily visible in the gaze. "It was the best way to protect the village," argued Naruto heatedly. "What about your life? Do you have any idea how Jinchuriki are treated in other villages? How our own people would treat you if they came to know? What about your health? You could have S during the sealing process or years after due to the sheer strain of keeping such a power within you," shouted Akino bitterly. Before Naruto could answer, Nagato intervened in the argument that was quickly spiraling out of control. "Because being a loyal ninja and protecting Uzu was all your life was meant to be. And if by becoming a Jinchuriki you could do your duty more efficiently, then you had no qualms even if you suffered or S as a result. Am I right?" asked Nagato accurately, fixing his friend with a knowing glare. Yes. Akino had known her friend had monumental F-up issues to deal with, but hearing him answer Nagato's baffling question truthfully showed her that this man had never valued his life at all. The worst part was that he didn't even know that he was wrong, if the sincere yet confused look in his eyes was any indication. What a mess, thought Akino furiously as she emmed her forehead. "Did our village try to steal a tailed beast?" asked Nagato worriedly. "I don't know, but it would explain the sudden attack on us and why our village was so ruthlessly wiped out to the last man," answered Naruto. Both the boys were stunned when Akino cursed out loud and roughly banged her fist across the table, nearly cracking it completely. There was a level of anger in her eyes never seen before by her friends. She was equally disgusted and horrified by the decisions taken by their village leaders. The S program, the way they F up Naruto, and now this. She nearly exploded right there on seeing Naruto staring at her in confusion, as if all these horrible decisions made by their village were right. That they made sense. Akino swiftly got up from her seat and stormed towards the exit, or feared that she would unleash all her anger on Naruto for being so blind. She knew he was made to be the person he was today because of his family's abandonment of him and the way Uzu had made him into a weapon. But she didn't have it in her right now to explain why all of this was wrong to him. From the corner of her eye she saw he was about to get up to follow her, but thankfully Nagato stopped him. Akino was never more thankful to Nagato than she was right now. She needed to get away for now. She needed to find her balance again and maybe try to understand how her now destroyed nation could do all those horrible things. She had loved Azu, dedicated her life to the village to the end, only to have her devotion be rewarded like this. Had she even known Azu and their clan at all in the first place? Akino didn't know anything in this moment. Let her go. Naruto sighed and allowed Nagato to pull him back into his seat. As they both sat silently in each other's company, Nagato decided to continue their conversation no matter how hard it would become. Why did you tell us both about all of this? Asked Nagato seriously. To make you guys understand why I am fighting and will continue to do so. Our people may have made some bad decisions, but we never attacked any nation directly and only acted in self-defense. The Uzumaki didn't deserve to be butchered to the last child. I will destroy everyone responsible for that. Those people, their families, their loved ones, their friends and comrades, they all will suffer the same fate. Only then will they know true pain. The sheer level of determination and coldness in those words and the hatred in those eyes showed Nagato the limits his friend was going to cross to achieve his goal. No matter what happened, he was not going to stop. No matter who got in his way, he would achieve what he wanted to at any cost. Even if it lead to his death or something much worse. And Nagato couldn't have that. Then let me help you. I am an Uzumaki just like you, and if you are set on going through with this, then there is no way I am letting you fight this battle alone. I don't like revenge, but I also don't want to lose my best friend. So either way, I am a part of this from now, declared Nagato sternly, and made sure his eyes burned with the same fiery emotion, daring his friend to refuse or protest. To say Naruto was surprised by the level of loyalty and compassion his friend had for him was an understatement. And it was this feeling that made him back down. Akino would never agree to this, he muttered, making Nagato release the tense breath he was holding. The fact that Naruto was saying this meant that he had agreed to let Nagato be a part of the Akatsuki. Neither do I want her to be part of this. It's dangerous and she is too good of a person to be allowed to be part of such a thing. But you and I have seen and done more F-up things than her, and frankly I could use the help, acquiesced Nagato. Naruto nodded but saw as Nagato hesitated with his next words. Say it. I'm with you all the way, but I won't stop you if you decide to stop yourself and maybe try to find a new way to live the rest of your life with us, revealed Nagato, and saw Naruto smiling amusedly at his suggestion. Never. Never say never, my friend, chastised Nagato playfully, making his friend roll his eyes. Naruto then glanced at his wristwatch and realized he had to meet Konan in less than half an hour. He didn't know what plans she had, but he was sure as hell not going to piss her off by not honoring his word to spend the day with her. Nagato must have seen the look in his eyes as he smirked. Going somewhere? Asked Nagato not too subtly. Just roaming around, answered Nagato nonchalantly. Then you wouldn't mind if I tag along now, would you? Teased Nagato. He smirked on seeing the low frustrated growl that escaped from Naruto's lips. Both boys knew it without even saying as to where Naruto could be going. After years of staying together by each other's sides, Nagato was well aware of his friend's visits to the brothel. Frankly, he didn't mind as long as that helped Naruto blow off some steam. Naruto realized what Nagato was thinking and decided to pretend his friend was right. It was easier that way than explaining that he was hanging out with Konan for an entire day. Because Nagato would never let him live that one down. And Akino would literally flip her ass. So it was easier to pretend that he was doing his usual thing. Yeah, I'm going there, lied Naruto, earning a small smirk from his friend. Then blow off some steam. You deserve it after the past few days. Thanks. With that, Naruto got up and laid a wad of cash to pay for the breakfast bill. Nagato only smirked and followed his friend as both the boys moved towards the exit. Konan reached the clock tower 15 minutes before the decided time. Call it years of habit, but she always made a point of arriving before expected. Usually it helped her to observe things, calm her mind, surprise people she had to meet, and sometimes even scold her friends for being late. She glanced across the area with a clinical gaze. The restaurant far across the street was gradually opening up for the day. A few people were rushing forth to reach their workplace. A few stray animals were searching the corners of the street for leftover food. Even the shinobi that were in the area were out in the open and were relaxing. Yet she was not a Junin for nothing, and her years of training and battlefield experience made her pull out a kunai quickly. She easily twisted around and blocked a kunai that would have struck her easily. There was a shift in the air, and this time she was surprised when a humanoid figure landed into the pile of grass near her. Not a second later, the familiar face of Naruto Uzumaki emerged in front of her with a satisfied smirk on his face. Conan didn't know whether to be angry that he had attacked her like this or be shocked that he performed a 40-feet jump from the top of the clock tower perfectly without suffering even a minor injury. He was definitely full of surprises. "So, what do you want to do?" he asked casually. She rolled her eyes. Trust him to not even given a care as to his previous antics. Still, Conan decided to roll with it because she had a feeling calling him out on it was a useless exercise. Besides, she liked the brief surge of adrenaline when he had attacked her. Although she would never admit it to him out loud. "Follow me." He blinked at her simple command and was surprised when she started walking ahead without even waiting or glancing back to make sure he did what was asked. Bossy. Still, he stuffed his hands inside his pocket and caught up to her. The people in the street gave them curious looks when the never-ending rains of Am didn't even touch the two shinobi. If only those people could manipulate chakra constantly to keep themselves from getting drenched. They walked in silence for quite a few good minutes without any of them saying a word. That remained the case until Naruto saw the large gate of a fun fair ahead of them. Her arched an eyebrow in her direction. Expecting his unasked question, Conan turned to answer. "How good of a shooter are you?" asked Conan, a hint of a challenge audible in her voice. "Good enough. Spoken like a true A. Well, we'll just have to put those skills to use," she spoke with a satisfied smile. "Bring it on," he challenged. Few minutes later, Naruto had a frown on his face when he found himself in front of a shooting range specifically created for ninjas. There were a series of targets spread across the medium-sized field. The twist being these target dummies continuously kept on moving. It was a decent challenge, and the only criteria for winning was hitting all target dummies in the center. All at the same time. He figured it was the last condition alone that had made every ninja trying the challenge to fail in one way or another. He looked at the price for winning this contest and was surprised it was nearly 5,000 ryo. That too cash up front. The entry fee was a decent sum of 100 ryo. But judging from the wry smirk on the stall owner's face, several ninja had already failed and he was making a lot of money. He looked at his partner for the day. Considering her ability to manipulate thousands of paper, even turning herself into one, this contest should be a piece of cake for her. As if she read the question in his eyes, Conan nodded. "I cannot participate because of my powers. It would be cheating," answered Conan playfully, making him roll his eyes. "Fatso over there won't mind losing some ryo," said Naruto, pointing at the stall owner, who smiled as another ninja lost the contest. "Already backing out?" challenged Conan. He simply shook his head and stepped forward towards the stall owner. The fat man gave him a mocking look but nonetheless accepted the money Naruto gave him as the entry fee. Conan's presence alone had managed to attract quite a few ninjas and civilians as well to their location. Apparently, besides being attractive, the Amkunoiki was loved by the people dearly. Naruto made sure to hide his disdain over the growing attention. He was an A, gathering attention was a bad thing in his profession. It showed either you were lousy or simply incompetent. He had to force himself to focus on the challenge at hand or risk losing his money. Call him stingy, but he loved his money and was going to make sure Fatso over there was going to pay him the prize money. With added bonus. As he stepped on the field and grabbed the set of kunai offered to him by an assistant, his training kicked in. He observed the entire area, position of the dummies, their movements, but was surprised when his sharp sensory powers tickled. Something was wrong here. He looked at the kunai in his hand and found them to be of standard issue. He looked at the target dummies and didn't find anything strange. But when he glanced at the tiny pieces of paper carefully hidden in the ground, he realized what was going on here. Naruto looked at Conan. There was no way a talented Junin like her, someone who had the power to even attempt to control his dark chakra, missing something like this. The contest was rigged from the start by the fat stall owner. No matter how much of a big shot you were, the seals beneath the dummies would always make sure to create a small hidden barrier, thereby preventing the weapon from instantly hitting the target. He had to give the fat stall owner some credit for his innovative thinking. Only a few of the dummies in the far-off distance had those seals, while the rest of the targets were free of them. If anybody missed, they would only assume it was because of their miscalculation or simple bad luck, and not because of the barrier seals hidden beneath those dummies. And those seals were also very carefully hidden and not easy to spot. She was testing him. He could practically see that in Conan's eyes. He could either call out this farce of a contest and expose the stall owner, or he could quit and steal the prize money later, or he could take the challenge and try to win. And if not all these possibilities, he could do anything that came to his mind. Conan simply seemed interested in seeing what choice he would make instead of winning or losing the contest. Naruto looked around and saw the crowd was growing larger by the second. So he made his move. The next second, the fat stall owner, who was previously anxious about the upcoming contestant, found a voice in his head. A really terrifying voice. In a matter of a few moments, the stall owner came running towards the front and called for a break. The crowd murmured in disappointment and slowly started to disperse, having lost all interest. Then the fat stall owner hesitantly walked towards Conan and surprised her by secretly offering her 15,000 ryo cash up front. She smiled and took it without hesitation. The cheap excuse of a person deserved losing this much amount of money in such a manner. Naruto simply walked out of the field and stepped beside her. Satisfied? He asked with a smirk. Very, she actually agreed. To be honest, she had not expected him to make such a choice. Sure, he would have caught on to the rigged campaign, but the way in which he dealt with it showed something remarkable about him. It seems you were expecting me to do something different, he suggested, as if reading her thoughts. Conan was not surprised, considering his unusually high perceptive skills in the field. Yes, I actually expected you to take up the challenge or expose the cheating. But if you had done either of that, you would have failed either by missing the target dummies or attracting more crowd attention than necessary. Quitting would only prove you failed the job. But you used your talents to expose the cheating and making sure not to gather any attention to yourself. The fact that you even got us thrice the proposed prize money proved you completed the challenge successfully, explained Conan in detail. Quite the observation, he praised. You are a talented powerful yet stealthy and highly efficient, she congratulated in return. You're not so bad yourself, he teased. Conan rolled her eyes. So, what's my reward now that I have completed your challenge and got you quite the prize money? He asked curiously, and watched her arch a perfect eyebrow. Conan easily handed him a thick wad of 7,000 ryo up front. The rest was carefully placed in her pocket. That's your share. I'll accompany you for any shopping, she decided. He shrugged and stuffed the money in his pocket. Even though he didn't hear her say it, but he had an idea as to what was going on here with her actions. Naruto dragged her through the fair. First they went to a weapons shop and he bought himself a nice supply of kunai, shuriken, storage seals, exploding tags and medkits. He purposefully sealed all that stuff in one storage scroll and stuffed it back in his pocket. As they were walking through the fair, he saw a pair of young boys trying to steal food from a stall. Instead of exposing them, he simply waited and observed them successfully steal some bread. However, before the boys could disappear into the crowd, he cornered them, and Conan watched him then give the boys tips on how to be better next time and gave them some cash to help them out when they were in serious trouble. There was no pity or sorrow behind his actions. Instead, he was simply teaching the two boys how to survive in their harsh world. After that, he actually bought her lunch, even when he had previously said she would be paying for the day's expenses. When she had reminded him of that, he had merely rolled his eyes in amusement and went back to his food. Despite not saying anything, Conan was actually pleased that he had decent manners when going out with a girl, despite what his earlier words may have implied. When food was done, he counted his remaining cash, which was still quite a lot, and took her straight to the nearest bank where she watched him deposit his money. If one thing was constant in the ninja world, was the fact that no matter how many wars, famines or other happening across the ninja world, no nation dared to even think of controlling the banks or risking having themselves destroyed. The few nations that had tried such a move in the past soon went bankrupt and declared not credit worthy. Even though this practice had created an opportunistic banking empire, it also gave security to ninjas because no matter what happened, their hard-earned money would always be safe. Even after their nation stopped existing, as in case of a zoo. So, what's next? He asked casually, after depositing his money. And are we done with your tests? He added as well. Conan should have known already that he must be aware of the testing she was putting him through both as a ninja and as a person since the beginning of whatever this day was. It was her way of getting to know the real Naruto Uzumaki in everyday life away from the battlefield. From what she had seen, Conan was satisfied. It could be he was deceiving her, but she doubted Naruto actually cared enough about her opinion of him to make that effort and was simply acting the way he always had. Yes, she admitted simply. Then tell me something about yourself, stated Naruto, and saw a small smile arrive on her lips. I suppose that's fair. I grew up as an orphan, parents while I was too young. Hanzo took interest in me during one of his visits to the many orphanages across Am. I passed his tests and he trained me to become a Kanoiki of Am. Ever since I have served him and this nation, answered Conan, and couldn't help some pride and admiration from seeping into her voice for her leader and the nation they both fought for. You must have performed some dangerous missions to be promoted to Junin quickly. That is apart from your skills and talents, which I have seen firsthand, he commented, and didn't miss the dark haunted look that flashed across her eyes for a moment before being concealed away by a blank expression. Yes, that was all Conan had to say. And it was all he needed to know. It never gets easier, does it? He asked with a knowing look in his eyes. No, it doesn't, she reluctantly admitted. They both continued to walk in silence for several long minutes, trying to understand what they had just revealed to each other. It wasn't much, but that hadn't stopped either of them from seeing the small similarities they had in their lives. How do you deal with being an asked Conan pensively. He went rigid for a moment before his shoulders relaxed as he studied her non-judgmental gaze staring back at him. So, he decided to do something. Conan was quite surprised when he fetched in his pocket and took out a small pocket diary and handed it for her to see. When she opened it, her eyes widened on seeing a name on the first page. And there were a lot of pages with names. No words were necessary to explain what he had just revealed to her. She hadn't missed his tension that he was silently concealing behind his blank expression. This was his test for her. Wordlessly, Conan read through a few of those names. Beneath them were the age of the target, location and manner in which they were killed by Naruto. People of different races, of different ages, all by him in cold B. She briefly swept her hand through the stack of papers carrying the names and was stunned to find them numbering more than 278. 278 people were by this man. Conan had never felt so trapped before. Akeno was right, Naruto never did things the easy way. He had today showed her a glimpse of his B past, his hands were tainted with the B of several innocent people. His ledger ran deeper than hers had ever been. As she walked silently beside him, she observed him in more detail. He carried himself with confidence and an aura that screamed at people to keep the distance. But she had also seen brief glimpses in his eyes when the guilt of what he had done reflected in them. She had seen it all during watching him visit the Uzumaki Memorial. Yet even so, with all his sins, Conan couldn't dismiss the fact that he had done good too, no matter how less. He was a good friend and had gone to great lengths to bring the surviving Uzumaki to Am. He had risked his life for them against Hanzo and entire Am itself. And that spoke of a conviction Conan could respect him for. She had no right to judge him or call him out on his past. Because even if he didn't admit it, Conan had a feeling it plagued him every moment. Even her own past was stained with B. Naruto was surprised and slightly relieved when Conan slipped the diary back in his pocket and took his hand in hers. That gesture alone spoke volumes of what she was willing to commit, yet he still searched her eyes for any last doubts but didn't find any. He gently squeezed her hand back. She smiled. You were never asked to kill children? Asked Conan worriedly, knowing the youngest person he had killed was a teenager. He shook his head much to her relief. I may not be calling the shots most of the time in my line of work. But there are lines my handlers knew I won't cross. Children were one of them. I was 10 when I became an A. Before that I was not in any control of my life. The same goes for children below that age, so I don't kill them. Although if the children of the target's IK try to harm me, then I have to defend myself, he explained frankly. I see, replied Conan carefully. He saw she was not much impressed with his twisted philosophy, but it was the truth he had offered to her. On one hand, he didn't kill children but wouldn't hesitate to hurt them if they tried to hurt him. She was right, it was twisted. My hands are stained with B, Conan. More than you think that exists in those pages alone. This is what I chose to be. This is what I am and will be till the day I.s. There can be no redemption for my actions, he confessed, his voice carrying the briefest trace of guilt and resignation. You're wrong. He blinked in surprise and stared at her to find a steely expression visible in her eyes. You may have chosen this path and done some things you regret or had no control over, but it is totally up to you as to what your future actions will be. Your ledger can never be completely erased, but it can be reduced, she explained patiently. How? He asked, doubt clearly present in his eyes. By doing good whenever and wherever possible. It doesn't matter if it's large or small, because in the end it'll help reduce the burden you carry on your shoulders. He stared at her and she didn't avert her gaze from his piercing orbs that were trying to look into her very soul for the sincerity in her words. Did it work for you? He asked, some hope present in his tone. Yes, she answered earnestly. He was about to ask how she made it work, only to see Conan point her finger forward to the destination they had arrived at. It only went to show how immersed he was in this conversation with her that he didn't notice this location before. Naruto followed the direction her finger was pointing at and watched in surprise to see himself standing in front of one of the largest rivers of Am. And across it a structure was under construction. A dam. That wasn't what surprised him, but it was the presence of his other Domino squad members Kyusuke and Daibatsu working alongside several other ninjas and workers to build that structure. He looked back at Conan. Every man and woman working on that dam has sins and demons of their own. They have ledgers just like you and I. It may not be as long as yours, but it exists, revealed Conan honestly. And building a dam absolves them of that? Asked Naruto in disbelief. No. Am is a poor nation and we do not have enough money to build such structures for our people in many numbers. Every person working there on that dam is contributing their own money, skills and time in building it. That work is not going to absolve them of their ledgers, but the dam will one day help the future generations of this country. They would have a future better than ours, and in that fact lies the redemption of all these people. This dam will be their legacy to Am and the world instead of a simple bee-stained ledger. It will be my legacy as well. Conan left him with those words and marched ahead to join the others that were working. Naruto watched her greet Daibatsu and Kyusuke, who smiled at her, and then both the boys actually waved at him in greeting. Unconsciously, he waved back. He continued staring as his teammates working side by side to build something that they would probably never get to use. Create something out of their own bee and sweat for people they would never know. Somehow, he didn't know why, it turned something in his heart. Naruto stared at his own two hands and couldn't help but grimace when he found them drenched in bee of all the people he had in his life. The nightmares that plagued him every night never let him forget what he had done. Even now, when Akeno and Nagato were settling in their new life, he continued to drift aimlessly in this world. His true home, Azu, was gone. There was no hope of bringing it back. He was going to make sure the ones responsible for that were punished and the ninja world changed, but if he survived that mission, then he had no aim left in life. His purpose would have been served. Akeno had always insisted that he was not a weapon, unlike what his handlers had told him. That his life could mean more than that of a loyal asset that could be used and thrown away. That he could do some good in his life if he wanted. He just had to open his eyes. All this time he didn't know how to do that. Yet watching these people work showed him that way. He wanted to build a legacy of his own that was not just a tale of destruction and death. Maybe he could make his life to mean something much more. He had never much cared for Am and only fought to protect it because of his friends and clan children living in this nation. But today something had changed. The poverty, the struggle, the hardships that plagued this nation. He had seen it all. But there was something more in the eyes of the people of this country. There was innovation, desire to help each other and work for a better future that didn't involve destroying futures of other nations. Of staying strong in the face of hardships and defending their ideals. He stared at the Azu headband he still carried with him every day. He would always be a Razu ninja and was never going to swear that sacred oath of loyalty to any other nation. But if he could just protect this peaceful nation in a world full of violence, then maybe one day that would be his legacy, and when his time came he could in peace. So, when he saw his 3 teammates staring at him, waiting to see what he would make, Naruto didn't disappoint. He walked towards them and started to help in the construction activities. Nobody said anything, but he didn't miss the happy smiles on their faces. Somehow he knew from this point forward he was not going to see these 3 as simple partners, but something much more. Friends. A heavy silence existed in Hanzo's chambers as the 3 people in the quarters silently tried to comprehend the information they had just received. Galatea remained stoic even as Mifune and Hanzo stared at her. Is this accurate? Asked Hanzo seriously. Yes. Iwa will soon get over their religious chaos that we had sparked by butchering their invading force in that dark manner. The Tsuchikage wants Iwa to win this war and has simply started the religious fanatics that are getting in the way of his victory. In the next 2 months, the full might of Iwa will rain down on Am, reported Galatea honestly. And how goes our preparation to defend our nation? Asked Hanzo, making Mifune nod. We are amassing our forces and calling back our deep cover operatives and warriors alike. Even so, we can only defend against Iwa for a few weeks. In a conventional war, we will lose within days if Iwa unleashes its 2 Jinchuriki in battle, explained Mifune. Hanzo took a deep breath and closed his eyes for the next few moments. When he looked back at his supporters, he had made his decision. I do not want our children to in a needless war. And there is only one way we can avoid this, by see off the H of the snake. Galatea couldn't help but be shocked on what her leader was implying. And when he fixed her with that gaze, she knew what was being demanded of her. Can Domino Squad carry out the mission? He asked seriously. They are the best this generation has to offer. They each have their own unique skills and are experienced ninjas. Even Yahiko seems ready as a ninja after his recent trip with Naruto. But as a team, I do not think they are ready for what you are asking of them, confessed Galatea frankly. Hanzo, this is AS mission, warned Mifune. To their added shock, the leader of AM actually nodded in acceptance. The fate of our nation depends on it, he said gravely, and looked right at Galatea. Is Uzumaki Naruto capable of leading this team and completing what I desire? Galatea looked her leader right in the eye and answered. He is more powerful than all of us. He just doesn't know it. His powers are more than what he can use. The only reason he doesn't know this is because his handlers knew what the boy can do if he learns what they did to him, explained Galatea sadly. I will take your word for it, Galatea. You would know more about him and understand him better than either me or Hanzo. After all, you 2 were an Uzumaki used and thrown away by your former nation, said Mifune compassionately. A pensive look arrived on the stoic woman's face as memories of her years in the S program came flooding back to her mind. The years she dedicated serving as an agent of Azu while spying on Am. The day when she was discovered and captured was the moment the nation she had everything for abandoned her. Yet she was not and given a second chance to live the life she had always wanted. She owed more to Salamander Hanzo than anyone else in this world for that. For a long time, she had been blind and remained just a tool to be used by people she vaguely knew. She had no dreams, no hopes, just a blinding duty to a nation she had never set foot upon once in her life. Forced loyalty towards a clan she was a part of, yet at the same time she wasn't. But Hanzo saw through her and changed her. Just as he offered change for Mifune and the samurai. He taught her to live, to dream, to protect and be in control of her own life. And that was a debt she could never repay. When Azu was destroyed, she didn't feel much sorrow but was disheartened on learning the entire clan was butchered. No matter what happened in her life, she had never wished for the innocent Uzumaki who had nothing to do with her fate to like that. And when Naruto Uzumaki had shown up with those few children at Am's doorsteps, Galatea had never felt more happy. A small part of her clan had survived in those innocent children. But most of all, she saw a glimpse of herself in that boy. They were more alike not just in powers but in the way they had lived their lives. In Naruto, she saw a person drowning in darkness with no way of seeing the light. Of a person that grew up as a weapon, and now that its users were no longer in this world, the weapon felt aimless and was drifting. If only the boy knew his own true story, of what he was really capable of what was taken from him, of what was done to him. However, Galatea knew the day he learned the truth would be his judgment day. It would either destroy him completely or make him even more stronger. Yet it was up to him to discover it, and she would guide him just as Hanzo had guided her. She had long since severed her Uzumaki heritage, but if there was something Galatea truly desired was the dream of protecting Am. And to do that she had to help Naruto Uzumaki find himself. With that dream and the determination to achieve it, Galatea decisively looked back at Hanzo and Mifune, who smiled on hearing her promise. I will make Domino Squad ready. His eyes snapped open instantly, and in a flash he had his hidden kunai underneath his pillow out to attack. But this time he was not fast enough, as the attacker knocked the weapon out of his hand. He unleashed a wild burst of his dark chakra, sending his attackers sailing away from him. Before they could retaliate, he was already jumping on them, only to have the person disappear into smoke. A shadow clone. His wild eyes scanned across his own apartment, which was mired in complete darkness. But he could smell another person's aura. As he was trained to deal with situations like these. The fact that his enemy had gotten inside his apartment, evading all his traps and without alerting him until the last moment, spoke clearly they were not amateurs. Expanding his senses, he tried to search for any trace of fear or nervousness bubbling inside his enemy. But there was none. The first attack came when the dining table in the kitchen was lifted in the air and sent sailing towards him. He was able to dodge just in time, only to have his own bed be thrown right in his face. Channeling chakra in his hand, he destroyed the incoming furniture to shreds and scanned his surroundings more keenly. Was it a puppet master? Or some other kind of ninja who could make objects move as per their will? Whatever the case, his enemy must have placed silencing seals around his apartment so that all this noise would not alert Nagato living on the same floor. He tried to use his dark chakra but had to make another move. By the time he placed his new kunai at his enemy's tea, they had an explosive tag placed at his forehead. Shock would be an understatement as to what Naruto felt in this moment. He couldn't see this enemy in the darkness, but what he did know was the fact that before he could even S their tea, they would jump away and trigger the explosive. He would surely manage to S some of their tea, but probably not enough to K. He was about to counterattack when the enemy spoke in a very familiar voice. You have a lot to learn. Female. Early 30s. Only one ninja apart from Hanzo had the skill and the balls to attempt to engage him like this. Galatea. It was difficult to see her in the darkness, but he could recognize her voice anywhere. Was there a reason for this? He asked. You are weak, petty and caged. He narrowed his eyes at the insult thrown at him but refused to rise to the bait. After years of training, he knew answering such questions was itself a form of weakness. Follow me. She was out of the window before he could even utter a word. Not left with a choice, he followed after her, making himself get drenched in the never-ending rains of Am. Dressed in just his shorts, he still didn't feel any cold or discomfort as Galatea made him chase her across the tall skyscrapers of Am. She was fast, but he was faster. That was until he placed his foot on the edge of one skyscraper to jump across the next one. It was then he was alarmed when a force twisted his leg and made him fall straight down. As he continued to fall down to his death, he saw Galatea standing on the faraway building without any trace of emotion on her face. He knew it was not his fault that he was falling, she did it. Quickly transforming into dark smoke, he rose back to the skies and charged straight towards the Am Kanoiki with renowned ferocity. Out of the dark smoke, Galatea saw an army of shuriken racing towards her. With a simple wave of her hand, the incoming metallic weapons altered course and headed straight towards their former master. Naruto prepared to defend, only to feel that familiar force from before into his sea. There was a pulling feeling, and the next thing he knew, he was being attracted straight towards Galatea's position at frightening speed. He tried his best in deflecting the army of shuriken, but a few did manage to dig deep into his Before he knew it, a bone-crushing punch connected with his jaw, sending him rolling across the rooftop. He could feel his temper start to rise, and he viciously tried to search for any emotional turmoil in Galatea's mind. There was none. The last time he remembered facing a ninja in complete control of their emotions was none other than the Yellow Flash, his own father. And he refused to let such a humiliation happen with Galatea. She may have some mind powers he was not aware of, but that didn't mean he was going to roll over and accept defeat. Galatea acutely watched as he lifted himself back in the air and now watched over her with his predatory gaze. These were the eyes of AK, who was ready to strike. And seconds later her instincts were proven correct. Her eyes widened when one of his eyes turned red and the other pitch dark. It was one of the most twisted things she had ever seen. But what happened next shocked her, for she had never once in her life seen anything like that. The rain stopped. The sky was still dark, but the clouds were mired in lightning sparks. She could feel the wrath of the sky gathering and knew the source of this gathering energy. She had punched the dragon and now it was time to face the beast on. Ahhhhh. Galatea had the briefest second before a torrent of water rained down on her position. She made her jump just when he yelled, but that only left her in mid-air open for his next attack. Ratan. A flash of lightning fell from the skies and hit Galatea straight in the sea, which made her crash across several buildings. When she finally came to a stop, most of her clothes were burnt save for her loosely hanging bra and torn underwear. There was a nasty burn mark across her stomach which was quickly healing, but she felt more than half her energy drain. She didn't have much time to assess herself as she saw a sea of darkness racing towards him. He was relentless. She had her doubts as to how he managed to survive against the yellow flash by himself, but after seeing the creation of his anger she knew how dangerous this boy was. And he was barely aware of his true potential. But before any of that could happen, she had to survive, which was asking for quite a lot given the current situation. So she zoned out of her thoughts until all that was left was the enemy in front of her. She didn't feel anything, she didn't anticipate anything even when she felt his attempts to pierce her mind increase by the moment. There was no way she could match him in raw power, but every warrior had a weakness. Including Naruto Uzumaki. His greatest strength was his greatest weakness. Naruto was about to launch his next attack when Galatea vanished in a flash. He searched for her chakra signature but couldn't find one. His eyes raked in each and every corner of the floor, every pillar she could hiding behind, every dark corridor. Stop looking in the wrong places. His eyes widened when Galatea's voice spoke, and looking down he saw her poking out of his own sea and staring at him blankly. Kai. He was confident that this twisted illusion would disappear when he released his chakra, but nothing changed. Your anger and self-loathing are your weakness. He fought fiercely to evict this illusion out of his mind, and thankfully this time it worked. But as his vision cleared, all he saw were yellow flashes everywhere. Father. Taking out his kunai, he prepared to defend himself and clasped his hands together when he saw kunais laced with exploding tags racing towards him from every direction. He saw fire erupt all around him, threatening to consume him entirely, but he maintained his focus and started absorbing the energy until there was nothing left. Galatea now stood before him almost, but his focus was simply on her face. More specifically, those eyes that seemed to discern him. You have mind powers like me, he said flatly. Wrong. What you have is a twisted control over a fraction of your power. You can't defeat me, much less the 5 cages in your current state, chastised Galatea, and didn't flinch when he narrowed his demonic eyes at her. But what she said next knocked the breath out of his sea. You still hold yourself responsible for your family abandoning you, stated Galatea. She waited for his response for several moments, but no words were said. However, she could see the answer in his eyes, and that was all she needed to know. You have learned to bury your pain with anger. It is why you can control other people's negative emotions, because you can control and harness your own. But that power is limited. If you want me to train you, then you need to follow my every command. The moment you oppose, we're done, proposed Galatea, and made sure to convey some amount of her intent to let him understand the extent of her warning. You're asking me to open myself completely to you. Make myself vulnerable. At your mercy, asked Naruto bitterly. If that is what it takes for you to achieve your goals. Naruto glared at her harshly, but it didn't have any effect on her at all. She still remained stoic and open to whatever decision he had to make. I can defeat you, he challenged, as he pointed his kunai at her. His eyes widened when he felt a sharp blade at the back of his en. He looked ahead to see the Galatea speaking to him disappear. An illusion. Confront your guilt and accept the truth. Love yourself for who you are, and only then will you ever master your true potential. The best ninjas in the world believed in themselves, and despite their actions they accepted themselves for the person they were, advised Galatea. That includes Hanzo. Mocked Naruto, But Galatea simply smiled at his poor attempt to rile her up. He wanted her to get angry, to loathe him just like most of the world did. That slip would give him the power and the control he craved over her. But without that negative emotion, he was nothing. And they both knew this fact. You can fight hundreds of ninjas, but if you truly want to defeat the ones like the Yellow Flash, you'll need to become truly invisible, suggested Galatea. This time another Galatea appeared in front of him with another kunai aimed at his heart. The one standing behind him was still there ready to strike. This is an illusion, he realized, and tried his best to break it. He couldn't let go of that anger. He froze when her voice spoke in his head. She was tearing his mind apart, but that was not the terrifying thing. What scared him was the fact that he couldn't stop it and was losing track of what was real and what was an illusion. You growing up alone was not your fault. Despite knowing everything, he felt anger boiling inside his sea. This woman had no right in prying inside his personal life, and she was going to pay for that. It was your father and mother's. The Galateas around him vanished and he found himself standing back in the area where the battle had been going on. He realized he was standing near the edge and so was Galatea. But this time, it was she who had her end pressed against his kunai. But all he could think about was what she just said to him. Look at me and think what you just said. Galatea looked at his demonic eyes, the dark chakra emitting only misery and death, the unrelenting intent of his. But it only made her smile sadly at him. His defenses were crumbling and he was desperately trying to clutch to the lies he had built his life upon. I'm a freak and I don't fault them for leaving me, said Naruto stoically. Liar. He flinched when she blatantly said that to his face. Akeno was stubborn, Conan was harsh, but this woman was brutal and was never holding back her punches. They didn't know how to raise me, he protested. He saw the moment his defense of his parents finally rattled the ever-calm woman. He knew the punch to his jaw was coming, but it didn't make it any less painful. She yanked him in the air with her hand outstretched and brutally him against a pillar. Would you do the same thing to your son if the situations were reversed? Asked Galatea, the barest hint of frustration evident in her tone. I've had training and experience in dealing with this dark power, he argued again. Galatea finally lost her cool as disappointment and rage surged through her eyes. With a flick of her wrist, she sent him crashing towards the edge of the floor below, which was a 50 feet straight fall into the sea. He felt several kunai connect all over his body, pinning him to the floor as the enraged woman started walking towards him. The training is nothing. The will is everything. She laid a final kunai to his tea as she sat over his sea. But this time he smirked as a shadow clone of his appeared behind her and placed a similar weapon to the back of her N and pressed drawing B. You lose, said Naruto victoriously. He was going to K her if she didn't back down, however she simply continued staring into his eyes. The will to act. He blinked on her words and that microsecond was all it took her to crush his clone by clenching her left fist. The last thing he saw was the image of a fist in front of his eyes before being consumed by darkness. 1 hour later, Galatea watched the vast river stretching for miles in front of her. The rains were pouring down like always and it made her yearn for that single moment when the boy currently lying beside her had made the rain stop. Even Salamander Hanzo with all his might couldn't do it. But Naruto Uzumaki could. She could feel it in her heart that if given the proper guidance this boy might just change the world. He had the power, the desire and the strength to do it. He just had to let himself do it, and that was the biggest obstacle. You don't have to pretend to sleep, said Galatea calmly. He blinked his eyes open and observed the river that she was observing. Her words from earlier were still afresh in his mind and heart, and he was still trying to decide whether to accept them or reject them. From the corner of his eye, he looked at her and saw that she was still sitting in just her bra and underwear. He looked away. Does my body interest you? Asked Galatea coolly. He remained silent, but it only made Galatea give the tiniest smile. He was smart enough to not openly say yes and prove himself like all other men, and even if he was not attracted he had the decency to not say that to her face. Not that either answer would mean anything. She had slept with men before during her days as an S operative and the truth of S never bothered her anymore. You would train me knowing what I plan to do to this world with the Akatsuki? He asked, changing the topic. As long as that leaves a Megacore safe, she countered, as he nodded in return. I may not have loyalty towards this nation, but I will protect it until my breath, just as I promised Hanzo. As long as I live, Am won't fall no matter what happens. She looked at him and he looked right in her eyes. I don't doubt that, but the truth is within the next 2 months Iwa is going to destroy my nation, confessed Galatea. He narrowed his gaze at that revelation and Galatea explained to him the situation of the Tsuchikage crushing religious fanatics that were protesting against any invasion of the unholy land of Am. She told him the time frame in which Iwa would get over its chaos and then rain down its entire power to crush Am. It was a credit to his talent that he knew what Hanzo wanted before she even revealed it. Onoki has to and Iwa consumed in its own war for Am to live. Yes, admitted Galatea. And you want Domino Squad to do this mission, he proposed. That was the only reason he could think of for her to take such keen interest in training him. He was the most powerful ninja on the team, the others also had the unique talent, but if somebody had to face Onoki of the Rock on his own soil, then it had to be Naruto himself. Yes, I'm not strong enough for that. And neither is Domino Squad, he pointed frankly, as she nodded. Can you make the impossible a reality? You're the only obstacle that is preventing this squad from achieving its true potential. For us to have even the barest chance of success, we need you to accept them all and lead them behind enemy lines and the Tsuchikage himself along with several top Iwa leaders, explained Galatea briefly. He took in a deep breath and stared at the sky for several long minutes. Galatea waited because without him there was no mission. Let me get the Akatsuki on this. We can handle it, he proposed, but she shook her head. We don't trust your organization. It's either Domino Squad or no one at all, refuted Galatea, and saw him smirk. You know Akeno and Nagato are in that squad, and if they go I will do anything to make the mission succeed. I am willing to and let my dreams wither away if it means keeping them safe, and you are using that sword against me, said Naruto bitterly. You're wrong. He was surprised at her refusal and saw that she actually meant that. The fierce look in her eyes a proof of her honesty. If you turn down this mission, then we have to prepare for a defensive war. Maybe we can stall Iwa for a few months, but we both know Am's chances of victory in a full-out war against one of the Great Five are none. You have a choice, and Hanzo is willing to go with whatever decision you make. No one is forcing you, Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto sighed and his forehead as he could feel the headache start to rise. He knew there were many impossible missions he had undertaken in his life, but not a mission of this scale. They were asking him to lead a squad that would bring down an entire nation. And Onoki of the Rock was one of the most powerful warriors in the world. That old geezer had fought Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha, been through 3 great ninja wars and survived countless powerful battles. If he made a single mistake against such an opponent, he would S. And if he S in battle without Onoki, his entire squad would be butchered. But even so, the alternative was seeing a Megacore a slow and brutal death. Iwa was not known to be merciful to the nations and villages it defeated. Its shinobi killed all the men and children, raped the woman and reduced anything beautiful the defeated nation might ever have. And somewhere deep down in his heart he didn't want that for Am. He had come to like this strange, poverty-struck yet striving nation. He appreciated the struggle of Am's citizens as they tried to develop themselves without destroying others in the process. They were a small part of the picture he visualized of the new world he wanted to create. If Am then so would his revolution. And he wouldn't have that. So no matter what, he would stop that from happening, even if it meant submitting to the commands of this woman. I'm in. That was all he said before jumping off the edge and disappearing into the skies, leaving behind a trail of dark smoke. If he had looked back, he would have seen Galatea smiling at him fondly. Few hours later, a series of knocks on the door alerted her to the fact that someone had decided to disturb her morning. Grabbing a t-shirt from a nearby table and adjusting her shorts, a grumpy Akeno made her towards the door and soon yanked it open to see a drenched Naruto waiting at her doorstep. He raised an eyebrow at her choice of clothing but didn't comment. She would him if she ever discovered that he thought she looked cute. Meanwhile, Akeno saw the bruise on his jaw and the slight C marks on his arms. She rolled her eyes and allowed him to enter but couldn't help smile when he gave her a thankful nod. Sorry to disturb your morning. I thought you must be awake, said Naruto apologetically. Late shift at the hospital, yawned Akeno, and saw him staring at her. Something wrong? But even as she asked him that, her hands were already reaching towards his jaw. He remained still and continued looking at her as she started her medical ninjutsu. The pain started to reduce, but he didn't reveal any weakness, even knowing she would never taunt him if he did. He remained silent as she finished healing his arms as well. When she gave him a sharp look, he removed his stolen t-shirt with a sigh, revealing the dark bruises and see. Who did this? Asked Akeno frostily. Akeno. Who? He looked at her and knew she wouldn't let this go. She was stubborn as hell. It was a trait he respected and hated at the same time. It was also this stubbornness of her that made her be by his side all these years. Had a spar with Galatea, he confessed. These injuries suggest something much more serious, pointed Akeno. She didn't know why he was evading even after knowing she could discern injuries due to being a trainer and medic. When he didn't say anything, she was about to push again until she noticed something. Yes, he was usually a quiet person, but right now he was thinking about something. Something that was bothering him. This simple fact made her realize how far they had arrived in understanding each other. Apart from her feelings for him, she really enjoyed being his friend. Despite his annoying traits, if there was one thing she loved about him was that he listened to her. She could talk on for hours about something important or nothing at all, and he would still listen. Maybe it was time for her to reverse the role for him today. Would you like to rest? Asked Akeno gently. Her letting this matter drop was not something he was expecting, and it showed on his face as he stared at her in surprise. She laid a hand on his cheek and laid her forehead against his. I worry about you. I know it can be annoying sometimes, and you are more than capable of handling yourself. It's just who I am, confessed Akeno, and made sure to keep her eyes closed lest she get hurt. She still kept her eyes shut as she felt his hand gently touch her cheek as well, his breath hitting against her lips. I'm grateful for that, he said sincerely. You are? Asked Akeno skeptically, her eyes still closed. Don't ruin it, Akeno, he gently admonished, and could literally feel the smile spreading across her lips. I didn't know you had a sensitive side. I don't like displaying this weak side of me often, he admitted. Emotions are part of being human. Even alike you and me are allowed to have them, she countered. They make us vulnerable to the world, he protested. But not to each other. They make us stronger, she encouraged, as she slowly opened her eyes to see him staring at her. We never agree on many things, do we? Asked Naruto with a faint smile, which made her smile as well. A good debate is good for health, spoke Akeno in a fake doctor-like voice. His smile transformed into a small laugh which quickly turned into a full-blown chuckle. Akeno couldn't help but admire this moment. There were only a handful times in all these years when he may have even smiled. But today he was laughing. And it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. It showed her a glimpse of the person he could have been if his life hadn't been messed up from the start, the person he could become once they all survived the storm going on across the entire world. She must have been staring for quite some time as he looked back at her curiously, which made her speak. It's good to see you laugh, said Akeno happily. Not many people can make me do that, replied Naruto sincerely, and saw a smug look arrive on her face. I'm awesome, aren't I? Asked Akeno boastfully, raising her fists in the air as if she had won the entire world. His gaze softened on seeing that serene and happy look on her face. It was so pure, devoid of any darkness or burdens. While he had agreed with Galatea to undertake the mission, he still had doubts in his mind as to whether he could do it or not. Onoki on his own turf was a monumental task. But seeing this beautiful, smiling girl before him who was his friend, his partner, made him see what he was really fighting for. He may like Omegakure and its people a little, which included Konan, Yahiko, Daibutsu and Kyusuke. But deep down in his heart, what he was truly fighting for was a world where his friends could live in peace. Where his clan could grow again, and where she could keep smiling like this. So, he was going to take this mission and get it done. He was going to Kaonoki and bring down Iwa. He was going to make the world a better place. Conan had made him realize that despite his sins and AB ledger, he could leave behind a good legacy. Now he knew what he desired as his legacy. No matter his ending. No matter whether he lived or s. No matter who or what he would have to face. No matter how many he would have to k. No matter what he would have to s and destroy, including himself. He wanted to protect that smile. He wanted her to be his legacy. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.